We're not here to work for you. We're here to work with you. Those were the first words I spoke to the church at Cristo Rey. Cristo Rey, by the way, means Christ is King. It's the name of the village, but it's also the name of the church. It's called the House of Prayer of Cristo Rey. And we came there as missionaries. And years ago, when we would talk about missions, we were always talking about doing things for others. Missions has shifted and shifted for the better, because missions now is more about doing with others. Yes, we go to share the words of Christ, but we also go knowing that they who are already Christians in these areas know Christ and know the culture better than we do. We did some important things. We had vacation Bible school, and children literally came out of the woodwork or out of the cane fields, because there's cane fields all around. And they came and they were excited to hear about Jesus, and our teenagers and our adults were there to teach them and to love them. But we weren't just there alone in vacation Bible school. There were those from the village. There were teenagers from that church as well who came and worked alongside our teenagers. There were mothers who came with their babies, and they would jump in and help with the crafts, and they would interpret for us. Oh yes, we came down there to help do construction, to help add an addition to the front of their church. It would add about another third to the building so they might have more people. And we were there to help pour the concrete and to have the concrete post put up. But you should have seen the partnership there. There would be a Belizean that would have a bucket of rocks, and he would pour it in, and then there would be one of our folks who would have a bucket of sand, and they would pour it in, and back and forth it went, and the concrete was literally mixed together, and it was like watching the blessings of God come together and get all churned up. Fortunately, this year they actually had a concrete mixer for the main concrete that was mixed. The next couple of days later, when we had to mix some more concrete, they literally mix it by hand. They put it all out, and then they just churn it up with shovels. And one shovel would have a Belizean with us, and another would have an American. And together, we would mix this concrete that would literally form the base of the church. Co-workers in Christ. We brought a lot of food staples with us and money to buy even more, and you gave things that went into what were called mercy bags, and we went out and we handed these out to some of the poorest folks out there, but we didn't go out by ourselves. Danny, who is one of the leaders of the church, he and his family brought their pickup truck so that we might put these 30 mercy bags in there, or else we wouldn't have been able to carry them around. And Danny used his influence, for he is a leader in that village, to go up and to call the folks out of the houses. And they are very hospitable, but you don't just go up and open a gate and walk in, because every house has a dog. And they're not like our dogs. They're not sweet little puppies. They're guard dogs. And you go up and you say dias or day or good day to you. And they come out, and then they quiet the dogs. And then as soon as they get the dogs quiet and they see that you are there to share Christ and that you have a gift, they invite you into their humble homes. And they open their hearts. And you tell them that we are here from America, and there's a church in Statesville, North Carolina, that wants to share the love of God with them. And they take the gifts and they begin to cry. And then quickly, after we have a prayer with them, they run around their house looking for something to give to us. Sometimes it was some type of artwork that they had made. Many times it was a pineapple or some other fruit. And as we emptied this pickup truck out of the Mercy Ministry bags, we filled it up with pineapples and avocados and all kinds of fruit, because we were co-laborers together in Christ. Dr. Hunter told you about going down, and I don't know if you realize it, but here is a man who took a week's vacation to go and to do 3 months worth of work in a week. Because that's how many patients he would have seen if he were here. It would have taken 3 months to run those through his practice here. And surgery after surgery after surgery. But he wasn't there alone, and we weren't there alone. There were Belizeans there as well. They were greeting the folks at the door. They too were sharing Christ. They were holding the hands of the patients, and while we sang songs to them of Christ to try to calm them down, they spoke to them in Spanish and explained to them what was going on. Make sure everybody knew that this was something that was being done in the love and grace of God. Co-laborers in Christ. Worship, we sang in English and they sang in Spanish, and it was like being in heaven. So you see, in heaven there are going to be people of all different nationalities and races and all different tongues, and we're all going to love each other in the perfect love and grace of God. And we got to experience that each night in worship. You see, we were co-laborers. We weren't working just for them. We were working with them. Because we knew that God was at work there before we got there, and God is still at work there now. Just as God was at work here in Statesville, and God is still at work here in Statesville. We weren't just co-laborers with them, we were co-laborers with you. Each person that has stood here this morning has thanked you for your prayers, and I thank you for your prayers as well. We have thanked you for the financial contributions that you gave. We were able to go not only and travel, but to help others with that, to help pay for that construction. There was one man there who had shared with one of our team members that he had a 7-month-old little boy that has asthma, and to go get the breathing treatments, it takes $10 a treatment. And they have to put the little baby on a bicycle, drive down the dusty, dirty road and get the breathing treatment and come back, and all the dust is stirred up, and it's as if it shouldn't even be done hardly, because it was counterproductive. And what they needed was a nebulizer at their home, and someone came and told me about that. And because you had sent with us some extra funds, we were able to buy a nebulizer for that family. And he is a local pastor. He didn't ask for that, but we were able to give that. So many, many needs are there, and we have so much. We were co-laborers because you were there with us. As I returned, I started thinking about we went to do for the church down there, for the people down there. But they were co-laborers with us because they taught us some things that can help our church as well. Here are some things that I think First Baptist Church Statesville can learn from Cristo Rey, from their church, and they gave us the logo of their church if you haven't seen it down here. The first thing I think is we can learn to do more with what we have, to make the most of what we have. They have so little, and yet they give so much. I believe if one of them were to walk into our church, they wouldn't just be amazed, they would be overwhelmed. They wouldn't know what to do, knowing that this great big facility and all of this space we have, they would just be amazed. They have this handful of people, and yet they reach hundreds. And sometimes we have hundreds and reach a handful. They open their hearts to God. I think we can be partners with them by learning from them that whatever we have, and we have so much, that we need to do more with it, and we need to see it more as a gift from God, because that's another thing I think we can learn from them, is to share with gratitude. They were so grateful and filled with joy. As Holly told you, these women fed 27 missionaries plus others that were there on the third staff, over 30 people out of just a little stove. And they didn't just feed us a little bit, they fed us a lot. I was told by Valerie before I left, try to lose some weight when you're down there. She thought, we could sweat some off and you could sweat it off, but every time they gave me food, it was just flowing out of the plate, and I didn't want to be rude. So I gained 4 pounds. You could not go to a home down there and they not give you something, joyfully give you something. They had an interesting way of collecting money for their church. I thought the first worship service was just to welcome us, and they didn't take up an offering. I thought, okay, well, it's just a little special service. And then they had the main service a couple days later, and they didn't take up an offering. And so I asked the pastor, I said, well, what's going on here? And then he pointed out that there was a box down at the altar. He said, oh, we just opened the box, and people give. They don't take it up. They don't pass the plate. They just open the box, and sometime during the evening, people come by and give, and what they give is the widow's mite. For they have so little, and they give so much. And they give it with joy and a smile on their face. They feel so fortunate that they can give what they have. When's the last time you were just so joyful? Joyful to be able to do something for someone else or God. The last thing I think, though there are many more I could share, but the last thing I want to share today that I think we can learn from them is faithfulness. We have many faithful people in our church, and I don't mean to imply that you're not faithful. But they take it to a whole other extreme. They live for God. Everything. Their faith is alive and vibrant. I asked for some of them to share testimonies one evening during my sermon. And they just began to come up and share how God was working in their life and overflowed. And a woman named Olga came forward, and she came on her walker, and she lived right across from the church. And every time we were there, she would get her walker, and she would come across the road, and she'd walk through the construction, and she would come in, and she would sit, and she'd begin to talk to folks. And Olga came forward, and she shared her story. She said that she got sick, and then she began to get paralysis. And she went to the doctor, and it takes a lot for them to go to a doctor. And she went to the doctor, and the doctor said, you're never going to walk again. You're going to spend the rest of your life in a wheelchair. And your life's not going to be much longer either. This is going to take your life. So Olga came back and asked her church to pray for her. Olga's church began to pray. And she got out of the wheelchair, and she began to walk with the walker. And she stood there holding that walker, talking about God's grace and God's healing. And then she said, if I can walk to this church on my walker, you folks can walk here with your good 2 feet. There's no excuse not to serve God. And I thought, well, if we were to say that in Statesville, we'd say if Olga could walk in with her walker and walk through that heat, we could get in our air-conditioned cars and come to church. Even more, we could take all that we have and go out and serve Christ. God is calling us to be faithful here in this place. You don't have to go away to be a missionary. You are God's ministers in this place for this time.